Hello everybody, welcome to the Builder Dad shop. I'm Builder Dad Dan, and this is my shop. Now today, I'm gonna leave this beautiful view of the shop and I'm gonna head behind my computer because I'm really excited to share with you my thoughts, the way my mind works, and break down to you my cost spreadsheet that calculates how much I charge and why I charge that for a 3D printed item. So I hope you enjoy the walkthrough. It's not going to be an in-depth deep dive into Excel. It's just a walkthrough through my thoughts and ideas. And then if you like it, you can click the link in the description and find the actual Excel file yourself to take it, make it your own, and manipulate it. All right, now let's take a look at what we've got in this spreadsheet. First thing you're going to notice is that down at the bottom, we have many sheets that make up this spreadsheet. Each one of these sheets brings in different information that's going to be used to finally build a quote. The first sheet that we're looking at here is the legend. Now for me, I default all of my views to 100% on the sizing, but to kick things up a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and increase this to 200%. That way you can read it a little bit better. But this first sheet, the legend, tells you about the different ways that I like to use color within my sheets. Next, the general sheet gives different information that's going to be used later. In this case, we've got the columns item, value, and unit of measure. In this, we've got energy cost, labor cost, failure rate, and money. So this is actually calculated off my electric bill to tell me how much a kilowatt hour costs me. So in my case, it's 18 cents per kilowatt hour. The labor that I'm going to charge is $25 an hour. So every time I touch a part, how much am I using my labor rate for? Then the failure rate, how many times do I anticipate a print to fail that I want to account for that cost? And then simply down here, I track everything in dollars. And so this is going to come into handy later when I use this to represent it in a unit measure field in the quote. The next sheet, printers, tells me about my printers. In this case here, I've got two printers listed, and then I've got a price. Now this price is actually the amount, and this is something to think about. When you're putting this information in, you want to put in exactly how much that printer costs you. Not just the printer to buy it, but is there shipping? Is there taxes, customs duties? All of the things that cost you to replace that printer. You want to account for that because that is going to be used up over the life of the printer. After that, we've got service cost over the life of the printer. So in this case here, if we're thinking about the Prusas, in my experience, I've had to replace a hot end already. I've had to replace a thermistor wire. And so this is the amount of money that I expect to pay over the course of the lifetime of this printer. Now this next one, the pre-depreciation time or life of the printer in hours, is basically how many hours do I expect this machine to be able to run before it's no longer usable. So I'm either going to have to do some major service to fix it, replace it, or I'm going to have to replace it entirely and buy a new one. That altogether gives me my ability to account for and calculate my cost per hour. So this cost per hour is actually how much this machine costs to run over its lifetime. Next, we've got the materials sheet. On the materials sheet here, this is where we talk about the different filaments that we're going to use. In this case, I've thrown 3 examples in there. I've got 2 from Prusa, 1 from bamboo, the names of those different ones, the price per spool, the price to order that spool. In this case here, I had free shipping. So if I bought X amount of units of filament, or I think it was $50, if I spent $50 at Bamboo, I would get 0% or zero shipping cost. So it shows there. Now here, $29.99 with $4.77 a spool. That's me looking at that inventory spreadsheet and doing some math, figuring out exactly how much does it cost me if I ship multiple units. So in my case, I think this was about 10 different units that I had to buy to get a $4.77 per cost per spool. And so you want to account for these things because that will give you your spool adjusted price. Now, before we get to the spool adjusted price, we also have the size in kilograms. So one thing to note is that you might have 2 kilogram spools. And so if you did, you can see your spool adjusted price is still the cost for the spool, but now you've got a cost per kilogram because this is what we're actually going to use when we do some calculations. All right, moving along. Now on to watts. So watts, why do we have watts? Well, if you think about this, each printer, each material goes together and it costs a different amount of electricity to print. So in this case here, an MK3S Plus running PETG requires on average about 150 watts per hour to run. A Bamboo Lab X1 Carbon running PETG is about 350 watts. And so this allows you to set, based on printer and filament, exactly what it's going to cost you watt-wise. PLA, other medians of filament will cost differently. And so this allows you to do this. Now, why do I have a calculated field over here? Well, if you look, I'm concatenating these two fields. That's going to be used later in a VLOOKUP to figure this out in the quote. But here you go. It's as simple as this. Now, this is actually the first part where you'll see where I start using lookup fields. And so before, all of the values that you were typing in were all just typed in. Now we're actually going to look up those values from the printer sheet and also from the material sheet to then go ahead and put this information in. That way you ensure that your values that you set carry through and you don't have to worry about spelling something with a lowercase g or you misspell it in one. It's going to carry through all of them. All right, moving along. Finally, we're at the quotes. Now, when we get to the quotes, I left this at 100% zoom for a second. And actually, we'll back out just a little bit so you can see it. Here, there is a lot of information going into this. And so all of these different sheets already helped us build up to this. So now let's dive in and break this sheet down and explain my thought process with it. All right, now that we're diving into this, let's see what we've got. I'm going to bump up the zoom. And so we're going to do some scrolling here. First off, what we've got is our model name. What is this model and what's the description of the model? Below this, we start getting some calculated information, part details, the weight and the print. Well, if you notice, these are calculated values. So where do those calculated values come from? This is where we're going to scroll to the right. And you're going to notice here, I've built out some different information. Here, I allow for multiple parts. So say this was something that had to be glued together or assembled or whatnot. This enables you to put all of that printer information in here. These are values that I bring directly out of the slicer that help me figure these things out. So in this case here, I've got part A and part B. Part A takes 5 hours and 55 minutes. It calculates a value for me that's going to be used later. Down below this, part B, 7 hours and 32 minutes, calculates another value. Here, another example of a drop-down list where I select my filament. Now my filament, I enter in the value from the slicing software. So from the slicing software is my hours and minutes. From the slicing software is my grams of filament used. That gives me my cost for filament based on the filament that I'm using. You notice that PETG Jet Black and Prusament PETG Matte Black have two different costs back from our material spreadsheet. They also have two different quantities used. So if we looked at this and said they were the same value, you can see that there's a different cost there. To back that number up a little bit there. Next, we have the printer, again, another drop-down list, which is going to help us calculate the printer depreciation and the electric to print. Down below this, we have some summary information. This summary information is going to be used to be provided later on the left, back in the quote. So let's slide back to the left here. Now that you've seen where the part details come from, let's look at preparation costs. So these are values of things that we want to capture in minutes. These are all going to be charged against the labor rate. Now in this case here, I'm looking at model preparation. So this might be things I have to fix, CAD, different stuff I have to do. Slicing and support parameters. So things I have to modify within the slicing software to make this model. Material changes. So if I was printing one color and then switching to another color, I might want to account for that time to switch for that material. And then of course, the starting or transferring to get things moving. So in this case, I'm saying it takes me 5 minutes to get a print started. Okay? Moving down below this, again, more costs in minutes that we're looking at. These are post-processing, job removal, support removal, additional work. This might be the time where you account for how much time it takes you to put it into the box once you're all done. Okay? Going down below that, we've got miscellaneous. In this case, we only have one thing, consumables. So where does this consumable calculation come from? Let's scroll back over here to the right. And if you notice, we've got a whole nother little section called consumables. This is where if I've got any hardware that I'm using, different things that might go into the print, I'm going to account for it here. And so in this case here, I've got the quantity, the description of what I'm using, the quantity for it, the cost per item, and then the total cost, which gets rolled up into a summary value, and then gets brought back over here to the calculated value. Now down below this, we talked about the various things that were calculated before. Well, this is where we get the filament cost from. The filament cost came from over on the right there. Remember our filament cost? Oop, right there. Our printer depreciation and our electric to print. If we scroll back down over here, back over here, we're going to see all those values represented down here now. So now you see filament, electricity, printer depreciation, preparation costs, post-processing costs, consumables. This brings you all together to a cost of how much does it actually cost you to print this? Well, in this case, it's going to show $29.24. So now we've got that cost. Now, the next thing is we want to take that and times that by that failure rate, so 10%. So we're going to increase that by the failure rate because you want to account for the cost of failures within every good print. Down below this, we get to the final piece of this, which is the quote. This is where we take information and it calculates up and moves that 3216 down here to give us the price. After this, we've got the price for box. Now this price for box is entered here, but we've got some shipping information that we're going to track. And so let's scroll over here and scroll up into the middle. And if you notice right here, we've got some shipping information. So this section right here talks about the package that we're going to use. So this is the package that we're going to use, the size of it, what it is, an envelope, its shipping final size. So we know that package size and shipping size are going to be two different things. Then you've got unit weight, the packaging weight, and then the total weight. So now all of a sudden we've got the information we need. We could go build the shipping costs. And that's actually up here. So in my case here, I like to evaluate and look at this with where I'm shipping it. So I'm going to give myself different options. What I like to find is a median ground where the cost, generally 80% of the times I ship it, are going to be within a zone. And so I like to use Portland, Oregon for me, just because if I'm shipping to Washington, California, Colorado, they're all going to kind of land in this same spot. Now, shipping to other places like Baltimore, Maryland might be a little bit cheaper, but I'm looking for that average cost because in my case, I like to build the shipping cost in for free shipping. And so this will enable me to kind of ride the highs and the lows, because if I was shipping to Alaska or Hawaii as an example, it's going to cost me a lot more. So I'm going to lose money on those shipments, but I'm going to gain a little bit more money off others. Now, the thing I put over here is I enabled another list, so you can actually turn calculations on or off. So what will happen here is if you filled in all these values, it'll actually look at this, and if you've got include in calculation, it will go ahead and do this. And then down below here, when we're looking at those shipping costs, this is where, when we look at this down below at shipping costs here, and apologize for skipping forward a little bit, it's going to look for the highest value. So you see how that's 7.88? If we move back up here and say we turned off this one right here to no, we're going to scroll back down here, and what you're going to see is it's going to pick up 5.25. But now if I turn that other one back on, not because it's the top number in this, but because it's the biggest value, it's going to use that as the value to calculate in. All right, so going back up here, we had the box cost, which came from our number over there. We knew what box we were going to use, so we plugged that in. Then we had our miscellaneous packaging costs. So this might be where you account for the packing peanuts, the tape, the labels, those kind of things. And so that gives us a total price to build and box. Now we add in the shipping cost and we get a total price to build, box, and ship. Now that is really good because that's your kind of break even on this. So now you can break even at $42.23 if you were to ship this out the door. But that's not accounting for all the overhead. So you've got websites, you've got processing fees, you've got a profit that you actually have to make. So think about it this way. If you paid somebody for their labor to go unload and load your machines, you're going to want to account for that separately because that $25 rate is going to somebody else. Well, the business itself still needs to make money. And this is where we get into the markup. Now here, I allow for post and pre-processing. So you can calculate the markup based on either with or without shipping. So in this case here, we're going to use a generic number of 50%. And so we're going to mark it up 50%, and that's going to give us a total cost of $63.34. Now, when we go over here to the middle, you'd think this is exactly what I'm going to charge. Well, that gives us a calculated number. Well, you might want to play with that number a little bit to come up with something different. So in this case here, it comes up with $63.34. I wrote in the manual example as $50, but you know what? Let's change this up a little bit. Let's say $63.34. So let's call this $64.95. Okay? We're going to make just a little bit more money, but it's going to look like a nice round number or a nice kind of number you'd see if you went to a big box store and looked at their shelves. So here we've got some more information. Now, maybe if you were selling this locally, you had to account for sales tax. So you've got a sales tax line in here. So if you were going to a craft show or somewhere local, this will kind of calculate it out and tell you how much you're going to charge with tax. So you can kind of see these numbers land out now. Now, if we look at this, I like to look at this to know exactly how much I could discount this product and what does that discount do to me. So here it tells us potential profit. Now, why is it potential profit? Because we might have other fees involved. So example of this is I use Etsy. I also use PayPal and I also use Stripes. So if we take a look at this and we say at 5%, at 25% discount, what will we be making? And so if we look at this, it had a potential profit of $22.73. If we look through all of the Etsy fees that are charged, we actually make $16.10. Now over here, we might come back over here and say, well, if we discounted at 25%, we'd actually only make $1.41. Now, if you looked at PayPal, what is PayPal going to cost us? And now all of a sudden you can start seeing the differences based on your payment processor. So this is how I look at stuff to understand what would I make if I sold this through my website, sold it through Etsy, or sold it in person? And then what taxes would I have to charge if I sold it in person within my locality that I'm in, or some other locality that I have to account for the sales tax? So if I was writing a label on a desk or on a sticker, this might be the number that I'm using to put on a table to sell this product. Okay? Now, I like to look at stuff a little bit differently. Now, 50%, that might be where you want to land. You might want to land somewhere at 25%. So a 25% markup. Now, what does a 25% markup do to us? So here, it's $52.79. So let's round this up and just say $53. I'm going to put $53 in here. So we're going to go back to our manual pricing information. And now if we take a look at this, we've got $53. If we look at our discount here, if we were to discount at 25%, whoa, we're already losing money. And we haven't even started selling it. Now, all of a sudden, if we discounted at 25% on Etsy, whoa, look at that. We've lost $6.70. So this is a way to help you understand exactly how you can build a product, account for all of its cost, make money on top of the costs to pay your business, because you've got insurance, you've got overhead that has to be accounted for. Because even though your printer's electricity is accounted for, the lights in your shop aren't accounted for, the lights in the printing area aren't accounted for, the time on your computer is not accounted for. All those various things need to be accounted for, and that's what that markup is covering. So this is my way of looking at stuff, and it's my way of kind of organizing this so I can make really good informed decisions. Because I think all of us always stress over how much should we charge for a product? What is the best price I can charge? And what is the price where if I charge that, I'm not going to make any money? Because you've got to make a little bit of money and you got to make a little bit on the overhead. So how do you calculate that out? How do you figure that out to see if what you want to print is actually going to be worthwhile to you? All right. Well, that was my spreadsheet. That is the way I look at things. If you have any questions, I encourage you to ask. And check out the link in the description to follow that to get this spreadsheet for yourself. And I hope you have a great day. Thanks.